from Wendy Kennedy, Inc. Wendy is on the call, but I'm going to host this one. But Wendy, you can certainly pipe in whenever need be.
Oh, sure. You've got me muted. He says
nobody puts Wendy in the corner.
No, really.
He says that, but he's got me over here on mute. No. Hi, everyone. It's great to be with you. Happy spring. Let's try to find some sunshine in this otherwise confusing time, but great to have you all here and to be with you. I'm going to join in as a participant today. So I'll just mute myself and put myself in that corner.
Well, thanks, Wendy. And it really is a pleasure to be able to introduce Karl LaPan to all of our participants today. Many of you know Karl. Karl's been a dear friend for many years, doing what he's been doing in Northeast Indiana and beyond, actually, with a lot of statewide programs going as well. He's celebrating 20 years now in this business, offering innovative programs and services to Northeast Indiana and beyond. The former chair of the International Business Innovation Association, but back then it was the National Business Incubation Association. And I'd also add was an interim president of that organization for about a year as he led us through some interesting times that we had. They have a federally designated women's business center at Northeast Indiana Innovation Center, the NIC, you'll hear it referred to, and where they run the Women's Entrepreneurial Opportunity Center. He administers and oversees the offerings of several other federal inclusive entrepreneurship programs, the EDA RIS focused on connected health, FAST Indiana focused on increasing statewide SBIR activity, and the PRIME program focused on micro enterprises. They have won 2 Accelerator Awards from the Small Business Administration federally. They are a designated opportunity zone, hub zone, and they're also ISO 9001 registered. That's really, those are just the highlights. There's so much more there, but without further ado, Karl, I'd like to turn it over to you and look forward to your presentation.
Great. Well, thanks, John. Following in John and Mark's footsteps of the last couple of weeks, I'll probably spend the next 30 minutes or so and just kind of give you some thoughts to think about and to process and to kind of evaluate, where some of these things might fit in for you. It certainly is not a comprehensive list of things going on in the entrepreneurial community, but hopefully some things to get you kind of thinking about the future and the services that we can offer to entrepreneurs. And then hopefully at the end of that kind of 30 minutes, we'll have plenty of time for conversation and questions and interactions, and hopefully more people sharing success practices that I didn't necessarily capture. So next slide, John. I think this is the context. Jim Collins always said, face the brutal facts and reality, depending on, which statistic you want to use. Some say hopefully as low as 1 in 4 small businesses will close permanently, or on the upside, if you think about Goldman Sachs survey, 50% don't think they're going to make it more than 3 months, even with paycheck protection and economic injury dollars. And so, just in the first 5 days of the program, $50 billion committed or deployed from that program to try to address it. But as we all know, that program is really focused on keeping the lights on, keeping people working. We have the whole issue after all this is over that, obviously small business continues to be the engine of the economy. And that's really what we all are focused on. So next slide. So it kind of, my thoughts are really around the 4 R's, recharge, reset, retool, reimagine. I think you see lots of wellness, self-care, mental health related things that require all of us and our clients to recharge. I think there's no doubt that there's a new normal and that it's just not going to go back to the way things were. So resetting to really calibrate around what that new normal looks like. Retool, it's a great opportunity. Every day you get lots of opportunities for continuous development and learning and opportunities to sharpen the saw and skills. And then lastly, I think reimagining. And so I kind of said, the courageous leadership tool set really, 4 things, we all have to possess: kind of emotional agility, seeing around corners. Compartmentalization, I think, is a big one right now in terms of how we need to focus on the things that matter and help our clients. And then the intellectual curiosity, the whole activities around upskilling, learning, and leaning in. Next slide. This was the cover of our issue of our Business People magazine for our community that just came out yesterday. This is our 20th year in business, and so we really wanted to focus on and celebrate and tell stories around unique entrepreneurial journeys. And I think, as tough as the environment is, we all have to really keep in mind, it's all about the business builder, and really focusing our efforts and energy on helping to find good, safe landings for our clients, given the level of distress, the level of businesses that probably won't come out of this, and start to position ourselves for what may be the silver lining, which is people are going to value social interaction a lot more than they did pre-coronavirus as they do today. And so, as we work through this, obviously there's a lot of uncertainty, a lot of trauma, but at the end of the day, we're here to serve and support the business builder or the entrepreneur. Next slide. John really raised this last week. I call it, what would Jeff Bezos do? So WWJBD. It's not business as usual. And thinking about, his Instagram post and his letter to Amazon employees, today we're really going to focus on how can I change my business model? How can I improve my company's website and online presence? And then what things can we begin to do today? Because I do think fast action is a key in this, is to be decisive and definitive, and to kind of place some bets around where you think your program needs to be to sustain itself and serve entrepreneurs. And so I think what John talked about last week relative to this, we all should kind of keep Jeff's comments around, reimagining Amazon in the context of a post-COVID-19 world is a key thing. Also this morning, and this may only matter to Hoosiers, but a former president of Purdue University passed away. And the final comment he made on the final day that he served as president was, our strength is people, especially people with ideas who are willing to innovate. And I would add, and people who want to launch companies. And so we need to focus on that, is that there still is this high people element. We need to focus on people who not only want to innovate, but people who actually want to launch companies. Next slide. So as we think about how to position ourselves as a valuable resource to the entrepreneurial community, really starting to think about how do we offer resources. To me, the biggest frustration, I probably get 15 to 30 emails a day on resources available in this kind of COVID-19 world. I think entrepreneurs need greater curation of what's out there in order to position ourselves as kind of the thought leader and expert. And so really kind of focusing on that curation to make sure that we're offering the most valuable resources to the entrepreneurial community are going to be really important, because, at least in the first 5 days of the paycheck program, there's lots of frustration. Lots of last minute changes, the forms when I went to bed Thursday night, were still not available, and the program was supposed to open up on Friday morning. So we have to reduce the friction for entrepreneurs, and how we position ourselves to reduce friction, I think, is really important. Next slide. As we think about some of the business thinkers, next slide. Okay.
Yeah, I'm trying to get it. For some reason, it's.
Uh-oh.
Here we go.
There we go. Yeah, I mean, you kind of look at some of the thought leaders, what do you do in crisis? And, the best executives see around the corner, right? We have to see what's coming. That's really hard in this environment because a lot of what I'm talking about, there's profound implications to the business model because, we're a heavily place-based organization. We have physical assets, and those physical assets are the economic denominator of what we do, and they allow us to do lots of other stuff either for very low cost or no cost. And so much of what I'm talking about, impairs the entrepreneurial support organization's business model because we all rely on, to a certain extent, the program fees paid by the clients that really support a lot of this loss leader work that we do, either virtually or with groups or segments of customers who can't pay for the services that we offer them. Next slide. One of the popular adages that we all can think about is when times are good, you should advertise. When times are bad, you must advertise, right? So figuring out how we position ourselves and the language we use to try to get the message out there that we have these business resources available and that we add value to kind of the things that are important for entrepreneurs. So these are just a couple. I don't have the ad mock-ups yet, but this is kind of where we're thinking in terms of messaging from our different programs. The WEOC is our women's program. The NIC is our more traditional place-based campus programs, but trying to position ourselves both as a thought leader and as someone who's offering value to our clients to figure out kind of the business model implications of COVID-19. Next slide. We focus in 4 pillars: capital, talent, workspaces, and networks. And this is just kind of aligns each of our programs to where they fit in that target area, because we also recognize really kind of N equals 1. Every entrepreneur has a unique entrepreneurial story and journey, and it's our job to triage those entrepreneurs and help them get to the resources they need to be successful. And so each of these programs attempts to segment entrepreneurs into different groups that have similar barriers or obstacles they're overcoming. And so our real focus efforts during the COVID-19 are to really kind of strengthen our value proposition to our clients and prospects in each of these 4 areas. Next slide. As we've been working virtually with our clients, there's really kind of been 4 things that have been consistent as we talk to our clients about what's going on. The first is the emotional support and connections that they need to get through this with having the uncertainty of not knowing when we're actually going to get through this. Secondly, the frustration they've had both on the economic disaster as well as on the Paycheck Protection Program. Minute details seem to change, which creates a lot of friction. Still looking at raising funds from investors, right? In terms of, companies that can't fully bootstrap in the ways that John spoke about last week, that still have that investor need. While that may be 10 or 15% of the companies out there, we still need to be attentive to what they need from a financial perspective to help them do that. And then the marketing side, right? Really trying to figure out how to pivot to sell virtually and to be able to offer something of value that gets attention from people to get them kind of focused on the marketing things that need to be done. And these are the 4 messages we're consistently, when we're asking our clients, how are they feeling, what are they thinking, and where are they going? These were kind of the 4 pressure points that we've heard. Next slide, John. So I'm going to just now kind of walk through some just specific programs of things we're doing. I'm only going to hit some of the highlights. I'd be happy to make the presentation available to anybody that wants it. The first is in our WEOC program, we're really focused on 4 things. We have a business builder program, which is a pre-accelerator. We have masterminds that are focused specifically on clustering companies towards specific problems or things that they're focused on. We have a bunch of online training and events, and then doing the virtual office hours. And so much of those programs are being powered by three things. Wendy's So What program, the Business Made Simple program, as well as the NIC Navigator, which is our online learning management system. But our key is to try to be relevant and to do further segmentation. I think one of the things for me that's entirely different from 20 years ago is that there is this concept, we're seeing it in healthcare, N equals 1. Each entrepreneur has a unique journey on their road to being an entrepreneur. And we have to do a much better job as service providers to find ways to meet those needs and help advance them. Next slide. And then I think the curation is important. We've tried to go through and in each of these areas, when you see the PowerPoint, it's hyperlinked to various authorities, with good information that can help the client, taking some that are focused on a legal view, some on an accounting view, some on resources available that come through, state associations like our Indiana Technology and Innovation Association, things that are coming through kind of our emergency response center at our statewide economic development organization. But we've tried to curate those in a way that we don't create too much friction or clutter for the client. Because there are so many angles to this, I think it gets frustrating. There's also latency in when information's available. So to the extent that we can make that easier on the client, we've tried to do that. Next slide. Here's an example from Mark's program in Florida. They partnered with a legal firm, and they put together a guide that very nicely lays out in a tabular form key programs and key resources available with lots of hyperlinks to specific programs, but it's a comprehensive guide to help make sure that the entrepreneur or the founder gets access to the right resources in the right way to help them advance. And so, it's a great example of working with local service providers to deliver some value, because this really goes above and beyond sending somebody a link and saying, here's a resource for you for how to interpret the CARES program. In this case, you're being walked through the specific questions that get you to the right program. And so I think it's a great example of how to do that. Next slide. In the case of Ted's program, he's not only extended services to his clients that physically reside with him, but to any business in kind of his service area, and being able to help them address kind of what new normal means in terms of their business model, in terms of marketing, or how to deal with employees, in this time of uncertainty. And so this is a great example, thinking back to kind of blue ocean strategy. These are non-customers. In many cases, he's working with businesses to improve their likelihood of survival, but they're beyond just the clients that he serves in his facility. And I think that's a great example of extending the reach of what the entrepreneurial support organization can offer. Next slide. Here's one that we launched a few weeks ago and partnered with a local marketing firm, both in a fun way to help people create an origami, and in a smart way of helping them get some marketing resources to figure out kind of what their brand story is going to be. And so it was just a fun way of trying to reduce a little stress, but also create a little energy around marketing. Because as you saw, one of the 4 key concerns we heard from our clients is the marketing angle. So we've tried to take what we heard from the client and intentionally create some services around it. This being an example of how we can use a local service provider, offer at no cost to the client an ability to have kind of this consultation and to hopefully create some conversation between the company and this marketing and branding firm to help people kind of get moving, faster. I think that's the key. Is paralysis is not a good place to be. Time is our enemy. You've got to make smart decisions and move quickly. Next slide. This is one we just launched this week, and it's the NIC Navigator Academy in partnership with Breakthrough for Business out of Australia. This has curated podcasts, videos, private groups, peer-to-peer knowledge sharing, lots of online tools, webinars, book reviews, and it's really kind of an immersive platform curated for entrepreneurs and provides them with a whole host of resources that we're offering at no cost to them. Because now with people having a little bit more time on their hands, you know, there is time to kind of polish their skills and retool, and also to have connections to the global entrepreneurship community. And so Nick Navigator Academy launched this week. It also allows for us to have some private groups, which is where we can add some value to specific programs of ours, where that is entry into that private group is by request only, and so only people that are affiliated with that particular you know, mastermind group would we let into that. But we have a whole host of resources available. And the next slide, if you're at all interested, they certainly are willing to partner. So I provided kind of a web link for the academy. I would just say, you know, their ambition is really to kind of create this global community connected with lots of resources and tools. It's highly curated to entrepreneurs. So unlike, you know, Lynda or Optimize Me or other platforms, what's nice about B4B is that it's focused on startups, founders, and entrepreneurs and the ecosystem supporting them. And so they are a resource that's available to any entrepreneurial support organization that wants to try to deliver this kind of value in their own community. Next slide. Now I'll just talk for a few minutes about a couple other things. As John had mentioned, we were the recipient of several accelerator prizes. One of the things that we have spent our money doing is creating a learning management system that is path driven. So it looks at the various paths that particular types of entrepreneurs or segments of entrepreneurs might take, and then we curate the education, discovery, field work, action planning, coaching, and we tailor that to that particular venture and its characteristics. And so that program really fosters kind of success-based, if we could just go back to the previous slide for a second, you know, success-based in terms of getting more people on the road and the pathway. And this is, again, our belief that N equals 1, that every entrepreneur has a unique journey, and it's our responsibility to make sure that our tools, the way we engage them, reflects what's going to be in their best interest to move them along the continuum. Next slide. You know, I think you can't work in the post-COVID-19 without thinking about capital. John did a great job last week of talking about all the ways to self-fund and to focus on the things that you can do that can dramatically impact your cash flow. I do think, you know, there's a whole stack of things, and we're trying to focus on these various pieces. So in micro lending, we're working with a large CDFI that has come out with a few specific products focused on kind of post-COVID-19 people that need between, let's say, 25 and 100,000. You know, we've started kind of a 3-week dialogue on crowdfunding, and we're going to launch a program in 2 additional weeks with Crowdfund Better. Our LEAP Fund, which is our own investment vehicle, has been focusing exclusively on convertible debentures. And then we partner with a large institutional private group of angels, vision tech angels, in Indiana to help get companies that are more advanced access to capital. And so I would just say the key here is be thinking about where do you want to play in any or all or none of these various mechanisms for the capital stack, but micro enterprises as well as high growth companies are going to need some capital access beyond bootstrapping, and we got to figure out where we can play and where it's logical for us to play. Next slide. And then this just shows under our SBA Prime grant, which is really focused on technical assistance for micro enterprises looking for outside funding. It takes a village, and you can see all of the various entities involved, both entrepreneurial resources and entrepreneurial funding organizations, to really focus on this problem. And one of the particular areas we've been focused on are the underestimated founders and underserved business builders, and getting them on the capital access pathway. Next slide. I thought this was an interesting one from Start Garden in Michigan. They're again thinking around the corner. Their positioning for this particular program was none of the existing programs out there address the entrepreneurs who didn't have the time to grow their business to the point that their own families are supported. And so they have started the Comeback Fund, focused on specifically providing grants to this segment of entrepreneurs who they feel are not properly served by the existing government programs or other microfinancing programs that might exist in their community. I just think it's a great example. Now, you may or may not agree with their thesis, but I think it's a great example of seeing around the corner to something that you want to affect and having a program to affect the change that you want to see. And in this case, they're going after these very vulnerable solopreneurs, who had just gotten started, who were derailed very, very quickly. And I just think it's a good example of the mindset that we all have to have. Next slide. Again, I spoke earlier about our Navigator program. We have a special breakthrough grant from a local foundation that's focused on delivering entrepreneurial services through trusted connectors. And so we've developed 8 new modules to meet learners where they're at in that process. And this just kind of shows you what our assessment phase. We developed a trademark process called Assess, Discover, Do. And this just is the assess phase of kind of how our big bias for action is we're going to focus on increasing the number of startups. And we're going to specifically focus on increasing the number of startups from underserved and underestimated founders. And so that's at the very essence of what we want to create. Next slide. This just kind of gives you, again, a framework for, we can do this on a self-paced or a cohort-based. It's very outcomes oriented to starting a venture. So this isn't really geared towards people who are interested in improving entrepreneurial education or knowledge. This is really geared towards providing a legitimate pathway to starting and growing a company. Next slide. And this just gives an example. We're also focused and very passionate about the rural communities in Indiana. There are a significant amount of rural communities, and what we do know from the research and what we've seen is many of them are getting left behind. There are 3 fundamental rural barriers that we're focused on: money, management, and markets. And this isn't your usual kind of academic content. It's very much based on the barriers and obstacles, and using kind of standard pathways to coach and move entrepreneurs through a very systematic way of starting, growing, and scaling their businesses. And it's very pathway specific in that the way we would organize the modules that a particular rural entrepreneur would go through would be based on our understanding and assessment of the specific barriers that entrepreneur is facing. Next slide. And so my final thoughts are this, it's focus, 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 decide what problem you're trying to solve, where your change theory meets the market opportunity. Second is focus on where you can deliver additional value that separates you from others who are passing on information versus curating information in a way that helps clients be able to act on it. Third is it's not a great time for paralysis. I think you got to be decisive and move quickly. And then lastly, it comes back to Seth Godin and being a purple cow. You've got to figure out what makes you unique, remarkable, memorable, and what differentiates you from anyone else out there, especially given virtual has a lot of negative impairment on the business model for many of us that are substantially place-based organizations. And so, this, again, as I said, wasn't meant to be all inclusive and capturing all the success practices that are out there, but hopefully enough to provoke both some conversation and maybe some thinking around where you might go to help your community kind of power through the difficult time we're all having. So with that, I would turn it back to John and Wendy for Q&A.
Thanks, Karl. That was absolutely terrific. And I'm going to encourage everybody to just start using the Q&A box to get some comments and questions up. I'd like to start, though, Karl, with a question on one of the slides. I think it was one of the where you kind of depicted some of the services you've aggregated during this difficult time. You talked about peer-to-peer sharing. Can you expand a little bit on what you're doing at the NIC relative to helping the founders kind of leverage off of each other on a peer-to-peer basis?
Yeah, especially in our women's programs, that's where I was talking about it. There's a lot of value in the social interaction, a lot of value in lifting each other up. And so in those virtual programs, a lot of effort is spent by the participants in being a good emotional support system for each other. And we see this more so in our women's programs than we do in let's say our non-women programs, where there is a more vested interest of the participants to be a good support system for each other. Like pre-COVID-19, it would not be unusual for those groups of people to meet together outside of the program to lend a helping hand to each other. So I think what we want to capture there is, virtual doesn't replace, true social interaction, but if there are ways we can orchestrate it to help people through this tough and lonely and frustrating time, then we want to do so.
Thank you. So here's a combination comment and question. Thank you, Karl. Great presentation. I think all of us in some way are in overdrive trying to help the immediate needs of our entrepreneurial communities. We know that some things will not return to the same. While we pivot now, how do we do this with the future in mind? Great question.
Yeah, that is a great question.
You answer.
I think the reality is we're probably going to have to pivot more than once. I think there's a short-term pivot in response to what we know and maybe the things we don't know. And then there's a longer-term pivot that's going to come out of whatever this new normal looks like. Last week, John talked about, 500,000 startups has pretty much been, what the monthly volume has been over time, or the yearly volume has been over time. There's going to be a whole host of new ways to connect, communicate, and drive value that we can't yet completely understand, because many of the people with ideas who are innovating are coming up with those ideas. So I think we should be a little easier on ourselves, that we should be focusing on a short-term pivot without trying to fully understand where things will be 2-3 years from now. And then there's a longer term pivot that I think we will see many of the environmental influences, political, economic, sociocultural, and technological, that will inform us on kind of a longer term strategy of where we need to be.
Wow, thank you. Yeah, very thoughtful. Have you had any requests to continue working at the NIC and any complaints about reduced service levels? And if so, how do you address these?
Yeah, you know, we in the state of Indiana, the governor's order for essential services allows each business to determine what their minimum essential services are. So we have continued to stay open to reflect the fact that each company under the governor's order has the right to determine what is essential and what is not essential. So we have continued to open. Now we offer staffing only from 10 to 2 each day, although there are 4 of us that kind of stagger our day to be physically on site. We do get complaints on service levels. For instance, you know, we've gone on a reduction on the HVAC system to better reflect the level of occupancy and the hours of operation. So it's a little colder in the facility than people would like to see. You know, we've reduced cleaning, although we were doing heavy sanitization. We've closed down a lot of the common spaces so that they've been sanitized and they're not reopening. So we have reduced some of those kinds of services. And then we have relied heavily on Zoom, which is tough on me because I prefer to meet with people face to face. But we have continued to try to reflect you know, all of the things that we know are important in flattening the curve. So, but yes, overall though, I would say unlike some other organizations who completely closed and did not give their clients the option of determining what was essential in the state of Indiana, I would hope we would get higher marks for doing so, but it has added to our facility costs. Because we probably average where we would have 160 to 180 people a day living in the space and 30 to 50 guests and visitors, you know, we're down to maybe 12 people that are physically working out of the building.
Yeah, thank you. Before I get to the next posted question, Wendy, I think you had a question.
Yes, I did. Sorry, I couldn't put it in the question box because I'm a host, so it wouldn't let me put the question in the question box. I just wanted to kind of tag along with Ted's question, Karl, and really, first let me say that being able to be a participant today is a real thrill to be able to sit back and really look at your slides and look at the storyline that you've put together. You never disappoint, Karl, and so many people have come back in the chat box and said, what a fantastic presentation. So hats off to you, because this really provided some great fuel, I think, for people to look forward, myself included. And so my question comes more as a business owner to you, which is, you have always talked, as I've known you over the years, about N=1. You're very passionate about that and about meeting entrepreneurs where they are. So much so that, you know, even before COVID-19, you were looking at virtual programming and reaching out to meet people in rural communities, et cetera. So my question kind of picks up on that theme, which is, do you think, and I'm really looking for your opinion here, do you think that going forward, we're going to see a lot more remote and virtual programming, coaching, interfacing with entrepreneurs more remotely than we do today?
Yeah, I think it's going to be a hybrid. I think more and more people thought it could be done virtually with the same success that you get from kind of the physical side of it. But I do think people have come to really value the social interaction. What will be interesting to see is is kind of, completion rates, start rates, can we get the same outcomes from working virtually as we get when the company lives physically with us in the space. I also think, especially with where we're trying to go on the diverse and inclusive side of the entrepreneurship spectrum, trust, confidence building are really hard to create through the virtual platform, especially when you're for instance, our breakthrough program, which is funded by a local foundation. And I had a conference call with them yesterday on our progress report. And one of the things I said that is a risk in our outcomes is we have not had the ability to establish trust with the participants through one-on-one interactions in a physical way. It will be interesting to see whether or not those can be replicated virtually and if we can get good completion and start rates from our virtual program. But I actually think there's going to be a greater emphasis on social interaction when this is over. But there will be some tentativeness for a period of time about how we interact and how we phase back into this less isolated world.
Before I get into David Mann's question regarding M&A, Michael Clauser did ask one that's very much related to, I think, this topic. And he's just asking if there's any particular tools or platforms beyond the usual Zoom, Google Meetup, Skype, Slack, et cetera, that any of us want to mention as being relevant in terms of virtual delivery of services now. And to that end, I can tell you that Wendy and I are having deep strategic discussions about how to deliver the full value of ideation and startup formation in an online methodology that would become self-paced. But Karl, I turn Michael's question over to you on any other tools or platforms that you're using.
Yeah, ours has really focused on that academy product with Breakthrough for Business and our own personal learning management system, which is pathway specific and it's segment specific. As two of our kind of proprietary, two of our branded products that we're using. We've not, we've only begun to scratch the surface on other virtual tools. Our challenge is we got to figure out what the monetization looks like because, there's a perception in the marketplace that a lot of this virtual stuff is free or dirt cheap. And so, we generate a significant amount of program fees from our physical space, and we're going to have to figure out what tools lead us to be able to create the kind of experience that somebody will value enough that they would be willing to at some point pay for it. We're very fortunate that we have a number of federal grants that we can focus our efforts on to create kind of these virtual opportunities at little to no cost for the participant, but that's not a long-term solution for creating a viable business model.
And then from David Mann, he's asking if you see a role in M&A to keep companies going. Many startups have point solutions that can augment the market solutions for larger companies with cash access.
Yeah, certainly possible, but based on the data you presented last week and based on, if you look at the University of New Hampshire Venture Research Center data, we're talking about, in the portfolio, let's just round to 10 to 15%, of companies, are venturable, right? So then it becomes very Darwinian in terms of the numbers. If 85% of companies are more self-funded, bootstrap, customer funded, and 10 to 15% are venturable, and we look at the total portfolio of companies out there, to do a roll-up that makes any sense, I think only addresses a very small segment of the marketplace. So certainly it can, and certainly it might, but I don't know that it's a a solution to the larger problem of the companies that are growing their hometown teams in their local communities, who are creating jobs and companies that employ people and produce better quality of life. Most of those companies are going to be self-funded, bootstrapped, or customer funded.
Thanks for that. Please, if there's any other questions, please post them. We have one here from Mark. Unfortunately, it's nearing the time for us to renew several sponsors. Do you have any recommendations on how to handle these now?
Yeah, well, Mark is the master of this. My advice in the way we're focusing on it is really twofold. One is trying to secure the sponsorship, but defer the payment to later. So for us, it would be more important to get the committed sponsor than necessarily to get the money today. I think given, if 50 billion went out between Friday and today on the Paycheck Protection Plan, it's hard for companies to be thinking about sponsorship when they're not sure whether they're furloughing, laying off, or closing their business. So I would focus on securing the sponsorship and offering a deferred payment plan. And then I think the second thing is making the case for the multiplier effect of how the money, if spent on the sponsorship, can impact how many companies and how many people as a result of it, so that you can show a substantial multiplier effect from the money a company might give and how many people that might impact, and that by doing it with the incubator or the entrepreneurial support organization, it's almost like the United Way of entrepreneurship. You're giving it to us and it's benefiting X number of companies and people. To me, those would be the two areas I would be focused on.
Yeah, no, great approach. If you do have any other questions, please go ahead and post them. I would like to thank everybody for participating. The great thing is I'm tracking the participant level is that nobody's dropped from the call. So that to me is kind of a great expression of the value of what we're doing with these. Before I turn it over to Wendy to close up, there's two requests I have. One, well, first of all, thanks to all of you for participating, but my requests are these. If any of you have an idea for a topic on a webinar, if any of you want to deliver a webinar for us, we would truly appreciate having you get a hold of either me or Wendy. We'll work with you to kind of get that set up. We are pretty much full through the month of April so far, but this is proving to be such a great peer group that we want to keep these going, and we'll be exploring maybe even some other, maybe not different delivery mechanisms, but maybe for a way to kind of open up the conversation so it becomes more of a peer-to-peer kind of sharing group. The other thing I want to encourage you all to do is to join us next week. Of course, this information today presented by Karl will be made available. The recording will be made available, as will future webinars and all the past webinars. Get a hold of us if you don't have those links. But I really want to encourage you to join us next week when I'll be presenting a webinar on a new tool that we've developed called eGauge, which will enable many of you to determine where you stand in the industry. So we're in beta right now with that. Have had any number of people go through it, but we're going to kind of open it up through this webinar series. So hopefully we'll see you next week. Wendy, do you have any comments you want to close with?
Just want to echo your thoughts. I think it's really true is that, we have a really committed group of people who are joining in every week, which is fantastic. And I think that even if you have an idea for a topic, you don't know someone that might present that topic, feel free to share that with us. And we'll scout throughout our networks to see if we can find someone who could represent on that topic. But now that we're kind of a few weeks into, COVID-19 and our realities of where we stand right now, I think that there's probably a different set of topics that may emerge in your mind. So don't hesitate. We're all, as everyone keeps saying, we're all in this together. So please feel free just to share an idea. Wendy@wendykennedy.com is an easy way to reach me. And I can pass it around to folks, and we can try to find someone to speak. Or if you do think there's someone that's a speaker, like John mentioned, that would be really helpful for us as well. And we can kind of learn and share, cast a broader net when bringing people in to share ideas with us. So that's about it, John. I don't have anything else. I just want to sincerely thank Karl. Again, just to reiterate, I think people really got a lot out of this presentation, Karl. So thank you so much. So many people commenting on how fantastic it was. I think there's just a lot of really great tangible takeaway program ideas and strategies and things. So you really covered a lot of ground in helping everyone, myself included, with food for thought on the road ahead. So sincerely grateful for you jumping in, and look forward to maybe bringing you back again for an encore appearance. Who knows? We'll have to talk about that.
Encore. I got my flame lit.
So
Careful what you wish for.
no, that'd be fantastic. That'd be fantastic. So, okay. Well, I think that's a wrap for today then, everyone. Thank you again so much for jumping in and sharing the hour with us and with everyone else. And we will see you next Tuesday.
Thanks, Wendy. Thanks, John.
Okay.
Thanks, Wendy. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, John. Okay. Bye for now.